Feck It moment came when I had actually fallen asleep, sitting upright, head back on the couch with the TV on, and my son came into the room. It startled me. I also felt really deep kind of shame and embarrassment that he was the leader of the pack, the mother of the family, sitting there asleep in the middle of the day. And it really jolted me into thinking, what the heck am I doing with my life? That voice that started as a bit of a whisper just became louder and went probably from, I'm not sure, to, it's time, I've got to find something else. Success scripts that, I came from a family where my mother wasn't in paid employment. I didn't have role models for what an active, successful working life looked like for women. I feel like I'm part of a generation that has continued to break down barriers, women who've really pushed forward.
I need to know to get to where I want to go. Sue, welcome to the Feck It No More show. Thank you very much for being here today.
You're very welcome. I'm really pleased to be able to join you here today.
Your story is one of them ones that I came across, Sue, and I thought, for sure, there must be a Feck It No More moment behind it. Really, really quick. We need your help to reach more people. We are finding the guests. People are coming on to share their story, and we need to get their message out to people who may be currently in that moment and needing to hear it. And I can't do that without you. Please hit that follow or subscribe button. The like button or the love button really helps us out. Most powerful is to leave a comment to say that you've either enjoyed the show, what you've taken away from it, what stood out for you, how it relates to your life, what you think other people would be able to get from this show. Things like that really do help us grow and make meaningful impact to other people's lives. I'll let you get back to the show. Sue, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience today?
I'm Sue West, and I'm the founder of two businesses. One is Flourish After 50, which is where I do coaching and facilitate small group programs that are for women over 50 navigating career and life changes. And I also have a second practice, which is Sue West Coaching. And there I mainly work with leaders, but particularly I work with associate professors and above in academic coaching. And I'm also the mother of three, stepmother of another three, dog parent to two, and have lots of other things that I would use to describe myself these days, which are not just about work.
Sue, do you want to take us back before your Feck It No More moment? What was life like at that period?
If I talk about around the time of 50, I was at the top of my career. I'd been promoted to the most senior level that I'd ever held, which was in a medical research institute and at the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne. And I had oversight for a team that was doing really interesting work on improving outcomes for kids and families in most vulnerable places in Australia. And so I spent a lot of my time getting on planes, going off to conferences, presenting our work, hosting guests in Australia, a lot of time doing grungy work like writing funding submissions and things like that. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all glorious and glamorous, but it was certainly very purpose-driven work and, work that took up a lot of my time and focus and energy and that I'd loved. And that was really at the pinnacle of my career. And at the same time, however, I also had been dealing with some years of sick elderly parents and supporting them. I had recently ended my long-term relationship and was the primary single parent of three children. And so life was busy at work, but it was also really busy at home. I think what happened for me is that I stayed busy, and then COVID came and we all became a little bit less busy. And certainly for me, being at home meant that I wasn't traveling the world and getting on stages and all those things. I still had work I had to produce. I still had a team to supervise, but really the things that I really enjoyed about my work were no longer available.
I'm guessing from what you've just said, you're quite a driven person because you get to the top of that career, as you say, the pinnacle, which means you're quite focused and you put the energy and the effort into that. And you say that life's busy then as well. And usually whenever I've kind of worked alongside or with people that are driven like that, everything else in their life, they put kind of that 100% effort into. Would that be a fair statement, I'm guessing?
Yes, it would. I'd absolutely say that. And I would say, perfectionist tendencies and all of those sorts of things that come into play when you're a very focused and driven person. Yeah.
Look, I suppose your story resonates a lot with my own because I would like to think that I was that similar type person and made it to where I was like an executive operations manager. Company wanted to push me on to become CEO. I thought I was on the right path and had put nearly 8 years driven work to get there. You've got that little bit more time to think, I'm guessing, as well. How does that impact your life, going from that driven person to having more time
Yeah, I think when I think back on it, I think there's another kind of element that came into play for me, which was probably in the being busy. I guess I had started to notice that my passion was, I'd been doing the same work for 10 years and my passion was starting to wane or, it was starting to feel a little bit on repeat. And probably at another stage in my life, it would have been a time when I'd started to think about what was I going to do next. And that, for whatever reason, that didn't happen. So, but when COVID came and things quietened down and I had a lot of time to think and write, I enjoy journaling. That was the kind of question that came up for me was, does this job still hold it for me? What do I want for myself now? If I've got another 10 years of work, I was 57 and thought in my own mind that 67 was when you retired. And I now don't believe that. But at the time, that's the idea that I was holding in my mind and thinking about, well, if this is it, what do I want to do? And I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have a next job in the career that I'd been pursuing my whole life. There wasn't the next thing that I could see for me in that work. And I think combined with probably a little bit of, burnout's probably too strong a word, but I kind of run out of steam for what I was doing. So dearly want to just keep going.
Do you think it was steam that you run out of, or was it maybe passion? I know that whenever I think back to my journey, which happened, I was probably 47 and I'd been thinking about for probably 5 years. I was like, do you know what? Whenever I get to 60, I'm going to do this coaching and helping and support people thing at maybe 55, 60, whenever a bit more money in the bank until, I've said it before in the podcast, but my friend tells me 6 months to live, and it was a real light bulb moment for me where it was like, okay, I'm not guaranteed another 10 or 15 years, so I'm going to make the decision now. But I suppose I could notice my passion for what I was doing. Whenever I was first starting, whenever I was on the journey, I thought, this is my path, this is what I want to be doing, and I was enjoying every moment of it. But somewhere along the line, whether it was routine, whether it was because I was doing the same thing, whether it was because I was dealing with the same problems or having the same discussions or the same chats, I don't know, but somewhere along the line, I think maybe the passion maybe left a little bit. Was there any of that for you? Was that similar?
Yeah, I think probably. And it's really hard for me to think about because I had been so committed to the work that I was doing. It meant so much to me that it was really kind of hard to get in touch with that part of me that didn't want to be doing that anymore. And because being a very purpose-driven, wanting to make a difference in the world kind of person, it felt like particularly when I had started to work for the organisations that I was at the time, I felt like I'd experienced this real coming home of this is where I'm meant to be, this is my career's led to this. It was my absolute pleasure and joy and filled my cup to be doing that work and being in those organisations. And it felt really true to who I was at the time. And so for me, it wasn't just about waning passion. There was this kind of identity piece that started to come into play as well, which I just couldn't at the time really face or look at. And I also had teams of people who I really loved and adored working with who were, going through their own suffering here in Melbourne COVID times. So, there was a lot of things going on. And it was pretty kind of tough process of realizing that wasn't what I wanted to be doing anymore. I think that for me, there was still a lot of dealing in the moment type things that I had to do because we still had grants to manage and we still had research to produce and publications to write. So we still had our busy work. For me, it was probably as much about the other really enjoyable part that wasn't accessible to me at that time. And it was in the absence of that, probably the bit that had kept me going for a while, that I really noticed my waning energy. Yeah.
What were some of the toughest moments in that period for you?
I think one of the moments that I found really tough was when I was supporting my staff to be positive and proactive and engaged in the work while we were all pivoting and adjusting to being online and in our own homes. And I wasn't doing so well in that myself. So I was needing to be the leader, that
they needed
quietly behind the closed doors of my own home. I didn't feel able to be that leader that I needed to be in that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I often say to the people I work with, especially in the leadership space, you can't separate the leader from the person. I did try in my early years. I was like, this is the leader I am and this is the person I am. And it never really quite worked for me. So I do believe that even the best of leaders have things that's happening in their own life where they need to balance and they need to manage. Was there stuff going on in your own life and personal life that was impacting that at that stage? So?
I mean, I had young adults. Well, they weren't even young adults at that stage. They were late teens who, I had one who just started university and wasn't able to get onto campus and was pretty unhappy about that. I had one that was doing his final years at high school and not being able to do sport and see his friends, and a younger one as well who wasn't traveling so well. So not only was I trying to, rally the troops at work, I was also faced with doing that at home. I had lots of joyful things happening at that time. I had re-partnered and we decided it, just before removal vans could no longer work here in Victoria, to move in together and make it quick.
Oh, so we were down together and nobody could get away. That was excellent. That was good thinking.
That's right.
That was really good thinking. So you had a lot going on. You've moved in with your new partner. You've got the kids that are frustrated and being stuck at home and can't get out.
Yes.
You've got the work going on. Okay, I get that.
Yeah, there's one image, Glenn, that's coming to mind when I'm talking about this. And, this was the reality for me at the time. I didn't have an office. Like I had used to work at home. I had a desk that was sort of in the center of the house that people walked past and there were stairs behind it. And when I worked from home, when everyone else was at work and school, I could just be there and feel comfortable working away on my work from home day. There was a day I remember when my partner moved in and their children, where I was surrounded by boxes, sort of floor to ceiling, removalists walking past, lots of noise and carry on. And here's me at my desk holding a national seminar Zoom meeting and trying to just zone everything else. It was like this, holding many balls in the air at once was the order of the day at that time.
I know that feeling whenever you've got two things happening in the same area and you're trying to stay focused on the most important thing at the time. During COVID then, so I know that's where your first Feck It No More moment comes. Maybe there was other ones that come along after that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that moment?
Well, it's a difficult one to talk about, really. And it's so just for me because of the sort of person I am, not because it's necessarily going to sound awful to anyone else. But we had a routine every day where we would get up, go for a walk the dogs. We had this routine. But there was a time in the day when we all stopped and watched the COVID numbers on the TV, and we got the update on how many people, how many were hospitalized, how many had died, and what the restrictions were, all of that sort of thing. So we were kind of locked into this time. And then what I noticed started to happen is that everyone else in the family would get up and move away and go about doing their schoolwork or, uni work or whatever. And I started to stay in front of the TV. I started to kind of sit there longer, not watching more COVID stuff, but just watching whatever. And then Feck It moment came when I had actually fallen asleep, sitting upright, head back on the couch with the TV on. And my son came into the room and it startled me. But I also felt really deep kind of shame and embarrassment that he was the leader of the pack, the mother of the family, sitting there asleep in the middle of the day. And it really jolted me into thinking, what the heck am I doing with my life? What am I doing sitting here in the middle of the day, sound asleep? And it wasn't as if I wasn't sleeping at night. It was really that kind of, they talk about fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It was a bit of fawn. It was a bit of, everything just closing down because I was in complete overwhelm with everything that was going on, but also had this kind of paralysis that I'd started to feel around work where I wasn't getting a lot of pleasure from work. And so I didn't want to turn up at my desk. And so sitting in front of the TV was a little bit of an easier option.
A couple of things spring to my mind just listening to you say that. So the first one is I don't really sleep during the day, right? So I understand where you're coming from. But my wife, Louise, who I love to pieces, is an amazing lady. And, some days if it's a down day, she'll have a little nap during the day. I'm wondering where that kind of shame come from for you? Because that's obviously something really personal and in depth in that. Where do you think that that shame was coming from?
Yeah, I think it's about the story and the narrative from that I grew up with about, kind of what I think about as success scripts, which are the messages that we get from usually in childhood from our families about what it takes to be successful. And I can see you're smiling, so this is ringing some bells. But it's really that, work hard. Actually, I remember falling asleep and when I was a teenager and my father getting really cross with me, like, you should be productive, you should be out there, you should be doing stuff. And it was probably a similar thing to that. Yeah, so success scripts about you get somewhere in life by applying yourself, working hard, and sleeping on the couch in the middle of the day on a weekday doesn't fit the bill.
I must say, Louise, anytime she does sleep, it's usually at the weekend, on a Saturday or Sunday. Maybe she might have an hour. But I do understand that I came from a father that pushed me quite hard in terms of work ethic and showing up to do hard work. And, that's one of the many things that I really value that he did instill in us. But along with that comes a little bit of pressure if you're working hard all the time and you feel like rest is something that you're guilty about. And I totally resonate with that. I think that hard work overcomes everything else. And in reality, we need a little bit of strategy and everything else in there, and rest. I suppose I've learned over the years that you mentioned success and what success looks like. I had a vision of what success looked like in my life. And I thought, you get the role, you get the salary, you get everything else, and that's you're successful then at that point. And I suppose during my own journey, I now realize success is different to everybody. Were you aware of the shame at that time? Like, did it stand
absolutely.
out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, just to go back to what you were sharing, I would say that I too had invested in balance in my life in terms of the exercise that I did and the downtime on weekends and all of that sort of thing. There was something different about this on two grounds. One was that it was during the day when I should be working, but the other was having it witnessed by someone who I was wanting to be a good role model for.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the challenge. I think as well, in the background, I'd been saying to my partner, I'm not very happy at work. I don't think I want to keep doing this. And that voice that started as a bit of a whisper just became louder and went probably from, I'm not sure, to, it's time. I've got to find something else. I felt really, really clear about that. And that moment of waking up with a fright on the couch was kind of pivotal in that process of going, no, this is not how I want to live. It's not what I want for myself. It's not what I want for my family. It's not how I see my life going, fully sleeping on the couch.
Again, it resonates so much with me. So the fact that you have that little whisper in your head and then it gets to the point where it screams, that is something that definitely happened to me. Can I ask how long that kind of was maybe going on for you? Was it weeks, months, years?
I think if I'm completely honest with myself, it would have to have been at least a year. And I didn't want to go there really for a while. It wasn't something I wanted to look at. And then COVID came. And then even then I was continuing to struggle on. And it was, because we had lockdowns in Melbourne for 2 years. So it wasn't until toward the end of the first year that I sort of had that really, really clear, this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. And I don't know what else I want to do. So it was a moment of clarity, but it didn't bring answers.
Yeah, it's one thing knowing you don't want to do what you do. It's another thing knowing what you want to do. I'm guessing mine went on for nearly 4 or 5 years. It could even have been longer. I started endurance coaching probably about 10 years ago, and that was on the side. And I knew it was something I was really passionate about. To see other people do something that they never thought was possible was something that was really ticked my boxes, because I knew the impact it had on my life whenever I was able to get from doing something I thought wasn't possible to doing something that was possible. And I did that on the side of, a very busy job for nearly 5-6 years. And it started off like, this is something I would like to do. That little whisper that says you're not doing what you're meant to be doing. But once you make that decision, it does come with a lot of stress, worry, and everything else. Did you experience that as well?
I think acknowledging that I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing actually created a very kind of a blank slate for me for what I might do next. So I didn't feel worried about it as such. Once I acknowledged, it was probably more the worry that had stopped me from getting to that point. But once I acknowledged it, I was able to kind of start to move into a bit more of an exploratory phase of what do I want to do and how do I make that happen? And I decided that in being kind to myself that I didn't need to have all the answers straight away, but I did need to have an intentional practice that allowed me to make progress on understanding the questions and finding the answers to them. So the first thing I did was created what I called a 90-day practice, where for an hour a day, 7 days a week, I put that time aside just for this question of, what might I do next? And with that time, and the reason I did it 7 days a week is because it's like COVID, where we're not going anywhere or doing anything, so I might as well, really commit to it 7 days a week. Also, I think because it felt just really, really important to me that I keep moving forward. And so in that time, I would allow myself to Google search, read, write, journal. I was asking myself questions about, is there something from my past that I might have wanted to do at some stage that hasn't had airtime or space? What are the things that I value? Are they still the things that are important to me now? All of those really soul searching questions was the starting point of just trying to find what I call the breadcrumbs for what I might pick up and explore from a feasibility perspective next.
I'm always interested to see how people think about the future. Some people are that busy either worrying about the past, and I've been that person where I've worried about everything in the past and I've worried about everything in the present, but I've never actually spent time thinking about what I want the future to look like or what I want my life to look like in that stage. And I've worked with and talked to so many people over the years now where I always find it intriguing, because there's usually two camps. There's the people that never think about the future or have no idea what that is. And then there's the other ones that have a plan for it and want to know how to get to that point. What did that look like for you, Sue? Obviously from the corporate world and being in that executive position, you were somebody that was used to setting goals, objective, targets, whatever title you want to put on them. Had you ever done that in your personal life?
I'm actually more a person who follows my passion. So when I think about job and my career choices, it has been less about moving up a ladder and more about, is this work I'm going to really love? I'm going to make a difference.
So you were always in that kind of mode.
Yeah, so I was always in that. And in some ways, I rose to the level of seniority that I did because I was really supported to see the difference that I could make at more senior levels. I might not have pursued that otherwise. At times, I remember early in my career being criticised by someone in a senior position for not being ambitious, not being more ambitious. And I was like, oh God, I'm ambitious. I want to make a difference. That's my ambition. It's not about money for me. It's not about power. It's about where and how can I make a difference. So I know that about myself, and I know that about about sort of what I value. And so I knew that I was bringing that into this next exploration. So the question wasn't how far up can I get in something new. It was really, where else can I make a difference? I've forgotten the woman's name in the US who, I think her name's something Parker, and she's done some really interesting work on facilitating meetings and experiences and events. And one of her questions she talks about, when you're going into that is, what's the difference you want to make? What have you got? What can you offer into that? And what's needed right now? And ask those three questions as you're setting up an event. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really helpful for me thinking about what I do next. And what am I good at? What might I be good at? And how can I use those to make a difference? And what does the world need? And when I thought about what I was seeing around me, I was seeing lots of other people around me like me who were struggling and suffering, and particularly women over 50 who were, many of them losing their jobs in my peer group, or some being forced into early retirement because the job market was sort of closing up and there was lots of uncertainty. That was a question that I was sitting with. When I first started at university, I really wanted to become a psychologist or a social worker. So that interest in human development, in working one-on-one with people, was something that I was really drawn to. But for whatever reason, this is kind of where I was following my passion, actually. I was interested in some other subjects that took me down into a different course and a different path. And, all these years later, I was revisiting, what was that thing that was of interest to me back then? I'd also had a more recent set of experiences in my work where I had become part of a team of mentors to more junior staff at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, and where I'd had the opportunity to attend annual training sessions on being a good mentor and had wonderful mentoring experiences. And I had an executive coach myself. I had a couple of different coaches over time. And it was when I put together this idea of retraining as a coach, as an executive coach. Once I'd done that, I was thinking about who am I going to work with, and the women over 50 and academics is the two things that sort of came up at that time.
No, that's good. I turned 50 last December. And turning 50 is one of them moments where age has never really bothered me too much, to be honest. I've never really stopped and thought about age too much. But there was something about turning 50 that I suppose it made me question, am I on the right path? I guess like one of them big milestones, isn't it? Where people kind of go, what does my life look like from here on? So I can see that's where there would be a lot of value in helping and supporting people going through similar things at that stage. So
yeah, thank you. And I think from my perspective as well, if I think about even in my own experience, and we were talking earlier about success scripts, that, I came from a family where my mother wasn't in paid employment. So my sister and I were doing something, well, she was in paid employment until she got married and then she was asked to stop working, where I didn't have role models for what an active, successful working life looked like for women. I feel like I'm part of a generation that has continued to break down barriers, change the laws. Not necessarily I've done that, but, part of a generation of women who've really pushed forward to live quite different lives. And I think when we get to 50-ish, there's several things that happen. And one is that we might have more time because kids are a bit older and don't need us so intensively. So, what am I going to do with that time?
There's a gap there. Yep.
Yeah. And the other is that, when you've been pushing, as I had done for lots of years in raising kids, it's like, what's there for me now? And I think the other part, menopause, oh my God, don't talk to me about menopause and perimenopause, which again can really change the brain and our bodies and be a time of reckoning. And, I think Brene Brown talks about it as like the great unraveling that can happen at that time. And if that's what happens for you, then how do you process that? How do you make sense of that? And where do you go next? I think there's also something about when you've worked hard all those years, and it sounds, this could be something similar to you, but certainly this has been my experience, is that I want something different now. I want something that's more on my terms. I don't necessarily have the kind of the image of what that looks like. You were talking about imagining that future. I don't have all of the clear mental models for what that might look like. So it's really about stepping gradually through that in a way that feels really aligned with who I am and what I want to be doing. I think the other age thing, if I can just add this in, is that once you hit 50, you've got fewer years ahead than you had behind. And when I think about career in my 50s, whatever decisions I was going to be making about that was not going to be building a career in the way it would have been in my 20s or 30s. So there's quite different dynamics at play.
Yeah. And you're obviously, not all the time, but I know for me, I had got to the point where the mortgage was lower. 2 of our kids had left home. We'd only 1 child left in the house. So, financially, it's easier to make decisions to do what you would like to do versus what you have to do. And I think that can be a popular thing. I can see this especially playing out now over the last few years with myself and Louise has talked about. Louise has very much always worked with special needs kids. It's something she's very passionate about and she loves doing that. There are other part of her life, our own kids. But then, as I just mentioned, 2 of them starts leaving home. They start having their own lives. Thankfully, we've become grandparents in the last 9 months and it's the best ever. But there's a gap that I've noticed. I suppose I have endurance sports and I have things to keep me busy. I do ultra running and I do triathlon whenever I'm not doing this work. So my life's fairly full as it is, but I noticed with Louise especially, and it was something we talked about, that she's like, what do I do now? So I can see that is a big challenge for a lot of people. So what's some of the most common things that you see working with ladies at that stage of their life?
Yeah, exactly that. It's kind of this paradox of I've got all this time and I don't know what to do with it. So that's absolutely at the heart of many of the challenges and questions that I see with women over 50. The other is around career navigation, late career navigation, I call it. As some women I come across, all they've ever known is the one job or the one career, and what would life look like after that, whether it's a different job but with more time to do other things. Sometimes it's like my story, people have run out of steam and don't want to keep going in that way. Sometimes it's about they're still very ambitious and want support in the application to get a promotion to the next level up. So there's lots of different things that women come to me for coaching and support. Yeah. And at the core of it is this question about alignment between, what's most important to me and living a regret-free life. I mean, you talk about that awareness that you can't be guaranteed time.
Yeah.
You know, one of the researchers, an Australian nurse, she's a palliative care nurse who documented things that people said on their deathbed about their reflecting on their life. And the number one regret of the dying is not living most truly into who they feel they are to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what I hold at my core and in my work is that alignment piece.
And helping people get aligned. I have heard that study, and I've heard it from a few different places. The other one was connection. So the alignment with who they are and, you know, spending more time with family, friends, people, you know, being more connected to people. That was one of the big regrets as well. Something that my mind shifted to where I never really thought about time. From an executive point of view and from a business point of view and a leadership point of view, I always knew the importance of time. It was something that, you know, every hour, every dollar, every cent, every minute. That was kind of the school that I was brought up in. And that's why I was so good at what I was doing. So that for me was what time was. But I didn't realize that it was also my own very much precious resource. You know, I now put time above money or anything else. The time that I have, I've got a limited amount of time. I don't know how long it is. Hopefully it's a long time, but I know that how I choose to spend my time and the energy and how I do it, that's the most important thing to me now, whether it's more time with my grandchild, with my kids, with Louise, whether it's, you know, having these conversations with people that I really relate to. But once I realized how important time was, then it put an onus on having to find out, how do I want to spend my time? How do I align with that time? And that was one of the big shifts for me at that point. So you mentioned your 90-day approach and being intentional, that 1 hour a day to figure out, what do I want to do and what does my life start to look like? I really like that because it provides a structure where people go, okay, for this hour, I'm going to spend time thinking about that. How do you find your clients usually implement that and put that in place? You know, if somebody's listening now and they're thinking, do you know what, that makes perfect sense. Give myself an hour every day for 90 days to focus on who I want to become. What does that look like?
I guess at its heart, it's really an individual process for whoever coming with, you know, with that inquiry. And for me, it was, the question was work related, but it could easily as much be about how do I want to spend my non-work time, or what do I want my life to look like in 5 years' time from a holistic perspective. It could be any of those inquiries. For me, it was urgently about work. And I think what I would say is that there's no hard and fast rules. It's about just putting aside the time. As I said, I did a lot of Google searching. I would allow myself to follow my interests. So, you know, at one stage I was thinking, oh, do I want to be a psychologist or a coach or a social worker? That was sort of sitting with me right at the beginning. So then I found someone online who had promoted herself as a coach and a therapist, and I emailed her and made a time to have a chat with her and say, well, how did you come to that point? And what would your advice be to someone who's sitting at this with this question of these two different professions, and how has it played out for you in practice? That's a very active inquiry process of not just an online Google search, but really going out and either using my existing networks or just being brave enough to extend into those spaces where I didn't know people, but could find them anyway. So being a one shade braver is what I would say is really helpful. I also was writing down what I was doing. So for me, it was very much about being intentional and capturing what I was discovering, turning that information into the next question for me to pursue as I went along. Looking at courses for a while, what are the requirements, where I would be at the end of that course. One of the courses, I was going to be 65 and hundreds of thousands in debt by the time I was qualified to work as a psychologist, as it turned out. So that kind of, you know, that was a bit of an elimination process as well. And I think the other thing I would say is, in fact, what happened for me is that 1 hour turned into 90 minutes, turned into 2 hours, turned into 3 hours, turned into, I became really energized by what I was reading and learning and talking to people about. And so it was this small seeds of ideas just became bigger and bigger in my life.
I like what you just said in terms of that 1 hour turns into 90 minutes to a couple of hours. Before you know it, you're spending 3-4 hours on it. I have a very similar philosophy that I use with my clients, where I ask them to commit to 15 minutes of the growth mindset, where, hey, look, I'm currently here. Maybe I want to get to there, but it's about getting curious. And I say, if you can commit to 15 minutes of learning something new about yourself and where you want to go every day in that growth mindset, exact same process. Because I know if they've done 15 minutes, chances are they're not going to stop at 15 minutes. They'll go in until an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. For me, it's about making the commitment to invest the time in yourself and what you want to do. The curiosity stands out for me. I think curiosity is a very powerful thing. Whenever we get curious about what is my life looking like? Am I happy? Am I not happy? What do I want my life to look like? What would success look like to me? Once you can figure out them two things where you currently are and maybe where you want to get to, and get curious about, okay, how can I get to that point? That curiosity, I think, is a very powerful mindset. If we don't ask ourselves questions, we don't get the answers. And I know up until my 30s, I went through life just doing what I thought I had to do. I worked, I spent time with the family. I just did things. I suppose I never asked why, which was something that stood out. I encourage anybody out there at the moment that's sitting thinking, I'm not quite happy with where I am, or maybe there's something else out there, just to lean into it, as you say. It's a very powerful step.
I also took up running I was 49 and I'd never run before. I didn't like running. I liked swimming. I liked bike riding. I did not like running. I'd read books where the main character went for a run every day and I'd think, why do you do that? Anyway, I took up running at 49. At 51, ran my first half marathon and another one at 53. And I learned so much about myself in that process, so much about my body, my lifestyle, about incremental growth. And I think that's one of the things I would throw into this process of becoming and moving forward into a new sense of identity and role and place in the world, is that incremental growth is really, really important. We don't start marathon runners. We learn our way there. So learning for growth is really important. And the incremental, and I think the experimental is the thing that I really like to talk with my clients about. And that's about trying to get out of, and this is medicine for me as well, is try to get out of that perfectionist way of thinking about there's one way to do this and it has to be this way and I have to go all out to get it done. It's really playing around with something. So for me, you talked about your wife and wanting to bring other things into her life. I've had the same experience with more time outside of work. And so I've been experimenting. I played pickleball twice. I'm now trying table tennis. I am experimenting with some art. I've been doing print making and I'm just taken up drawing, and I'm sort of on the pathway to finding, trying new things, seeing what it's like, finding my joy, what sparks joy, what sparks curiosity, remembering I can do hard things. So when you start something new, it's not always easy. So needing to lean into that, I can't do it yet, but if I keep going, I'll learn how to do it and I can do hard things. So I think there's lots and lots of mindset and practice things that sit in this sort of liminal space for moving from one place through to another in our lives.
I think the mindset that you've just mentioned is one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people. Really quickly, talking of positive impacts, if you would really like to make a positive impact in other people's lives, you can do this by sharing the show right now on your feed. For every 5 people there's one person affected by addiction. You sharing this message with that person may make a positive impact on their life. Or share it on your feed. I know what it's like. Sometimes you can't just say to the person, hey, you should check this out. Put it on your social feed and trust that they'll find the message there. And again, thank you for being such a vital part of what we're trying to do here at Feck It No More. Let's get back to the episode. And I know it was for me for the first 30 years of my life. My mindset was the thing that told me I would be in the same job, doing the same thing, earning the same money because that's all I'm good at. It wasn't until I started to get curious, and it was saying that I could do other things and believing in myself that I could do different things like run the marathon. Even though I failed very miserably at the first time. Like, I wasn't one of these people that figured out, you can do a 5K or you can do a 10K. It was like I heard about a marathon. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's why I failed very miserable the first time and then got it right the second time. But it was once you understood that, okay, actually, knowing that I can do hard things and do different things, it just opened up my mindset to what else can I do? And especially as you mentioned joy. And I want to spend a little bit of time on joy. I think a lot of times that we can go through life where we just do things. We just show up. We work hard. As I say, that was my father's mindset. That was what was instilled. It was something you just work hard. You provide a good life and thing. And we didn't really talk about joy, happiness, or anything like that too much.
Feelings at all.
No, definitely not feelings too much. But I think that whenever I was getting curious about my life, And whenever I was making the decision to walk away from the executive role, for me, I was scared because I was giving up a lot of money to walk away from a role of security to something that I didn't know if I could make money at. But having that, I suppose, belief from all the experience I had and having that mindset to go, actually, worst case scenario, you can go back and do what you were doing. It's not the end of the world. But it's being able to tap into something that you really do enjoy and something that really fulfills you, because this is, I think, is where it links to what that success looks like for people. There was a period in my life where I thought, the nice house, the nice cars, the good bank account, that was success. Now, with different things happening in my life, I realize actually, no, if you have all them things and you're unhappy and you're miserable, you're probably not that successful overall. So I really started to get to the point and ask myself at that time, whenever I left that role, what do I want out of my life? I want more happiness. I want more contentment. And being able to work with people where I see them achieve things that they haven't thought possible, whenever I have them conversations, that helps me fulfill the need that I have of more happiness and more joy in my life. Whenever I do the events that I do, that also brings me the joy whenever I spend time with my family. But I didn't know what brought me happiness at that point. And sometimes I'll ask the people that I work with on a happiness scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely happy, love every moment of life, can't wait to get out of bed, and 1 being not very happy at all. Where do you sit? And I had to ask myself that question at the time, and I sat around about a 4, and I'm like, is that good enough for anybody to be like a 4 out of 10? I didn't like the job I was doing. I liked the people I work with, and I liked the things that it enabled me to buy, but I wouldn't say I was fulfilled. I wouldn't say I was enjoying it. And I spent 14 or 15 hours a day there, which is a big chunk of your life. That joy for you, Sue, what does that mean to you and the clients that you work with? Do you notice that that's one of the things that people are looking for, that happiness, that contentment? And it can be in different versions of that, but have you experienced that? Or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the name of my business is Flourish After 50. So flourishing for me is all of those qualities and more. It's good physical health and good mental health, but it's also about having joy and happiness. It's the quality of the relationships that we have. It's being able to master new things. So, there's great personal satisfaction when we try something that's new and hard and we get to the other side of it. So flourishing is this range of human experiences that contribute to good well-being, and definitely having things that make us happy are really important. And we know that happiness is a transient experience. So we never expect people to be happy all of the time, but there needs to be enough kind of notes and points in our life that we touch on in our day, in our week, that where we experience that sense of happiness and joy. And then there's another quality. I don't know if I really think about it in hierarchy. I was about to say one up from there, but it's this sense of awe. And that when we sit in moments of awe, where it might be about listening to a piece of music, it might be about sitting in nature and noticing the environment that we're sitting in, but it's this kind of moment of peace within ourselves, of wonder at the world that we're in, and that I think is also both joyful and rejuvenating and really, really important quality of life.
I think that it aligns very much with that contentment and happiness as well. It's the feeling and the emotions that you have. And I do agree that once we realize what kind of ticks them boxes for us, once we know whenever we get in them high feelings of emotions, but that's where it comes full circle back to the curiosity. Tell me more about where you are, how people can find you, how they can get in touch with you, Sue. What does that look like for you?
So for Flourish After 50, the web address is flourishafter50.com.au. I currently taking new clients, so I work one-on-one with women, and I also run small group programs, and I have a monthly circle, and the circle is an online discussion group where we discuss a podcast topic. I also have a podcast as part of Flourish After 50, and so we pick up a podcast episode or a book chapter as an impetus for a discussion, and so there's a once-a-month discussion group. I'm currently just putting the finishing touches on a new program to be released just in the next week or two, that's going to really focus on that, what I call that messy middle of change. When you recognize something needs to change and you're not quite sure. So something's ending, but something hasn't begun. Yeah. So in that space of messy middle, those questions that we've been talking about today, the who am I? What do I want? What do I value? What are my strengths? What might I need to do more of or less of, let go of in this new chapter of life? And what are some of the tools and mindset tools, for example, exactly as you've been talking about today, that can help me navigate that time? So the promise of the Messy Middle program isn't about coming out all solved and
Yeah.
fixed. It's really about knowing a bit more about where you are in this journey and being armed with some tools and resources to help you navigate that period of change. So that's Flourish After 50.
Yeah.
The Sue West coaching is I do some executive and leadership coaching for third parties through that business, but I also work with about, I think, 16 universities across Australia at the moment, where I work with senior academics in their leadership and career navigation, and sometimes just managing their jobs and themselves, because there's a lot of pressures in universities that can sometimes feel very, very heavy for senior leaders. And particularly at the moment, there's a lot of change going on in the university sector that can feel quite overwhelming. So that's all I do in that business, is the one-on-one coaching. Because I think what happened for me when I decided to become a coach and move into Flourish After 50, and I did training and all of those sorts of things, but I really felt like I was making an active decision to leave behind the career that I'd had. And that meant not anything to do with other academics or universities or research institutes and the sort of coaching that I am doing now. I didn't see that in my future. And in fact, I wanted to really distance myself from that. And I used to talk about my university work and my research as kind of using my big brain to help solve the world's problems. And coaching to me was all about using, it's relational work, it's interpersonal, it's really about being with that person rather than being the expert in the room, which I used to be in my old job. So I really worked hard on distancing myself from that. But I decided to throw up a website, Sue West Coaching, because I thought this Flourish After 50 might not flourish. It might not go anywhere. So I should, hedge a bit. And what's happened in the 5 or 6 years since then is that the academic coaching has kicked off and has grown and grown and grown. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It is a work that I really, really enjoy, and where I feel, in the same way that I do with Flourish After 50, that I'm having an impact in the contribution that I'm making. I've had to kind of give over to the idea that that's not a sector that I've left behind, and that continuing to stay connected in that work has been really enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that is that in leaving behind, I thought I was leaving behind the researcher, but actually I've done a lot of research as part of my setting up of a business and of kind of reading everything there is about navigating change after 50 and doing courses, and that nerdy researcher in me is alive and well. And in a sense, that's what took me into podcasting, because I get to learn a little bit about a new guest in advance of the conversation. I get to be the kind of the curious researcher in the moment with them when I have them, in the studio and we're recording together. And that part of me is very much alive and well as well through this new work that I'm doing now. So I haven't left myself behind. I might have put parts of myself on pause for a little while I breathed into the space of some new parts of me, but the other bits have caught up and I'm living a much more integrated life again now. And it's taken a few years for it all to come together.
I think the evolvement of what you're doing, so you've got that alignment through each of the different sections where you still very much want to connect with people and give people that resource and that support to help them get from where they are to somewhere better. In all three of them aspects, I can see where that alignment comes very well, and something that obviously is very similar to my own story. I encourage people that are listening today to reach out, to get curious about your work, to
thank you.
First and foremost, get in touch with you, have a conversation and see where and how you can help support them on their journey. What advice would you have for people that's listening to the show who are hitting that age and they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for a coach, but I'd like to start moving in the right direction?
I think leaning into giving yourself permission to go on that journey wherever it takes you is really important. And it's particularly important for women, I think, who can feel as though they need to be available to others and do what others expect of them. Actually, staying with what you want at this time and giving yourself permission to explore that is really important. And as you and I have been talking about today, I think once those questions are coming up for you, there's no escaping them. There is no way to put that genie back in the bottle. It's there. It's going to keep coming up. And the healthiest and most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to explore what that means for you.
Explore, get curious about, why is this coming up? What does that mean for me? I really like that, Sue. I really like that a lot. Our discussion today obviously focused a lot around our transition and how you noticed at one point that you were feeling lost, tired, fatigued, burned out. But it was a case of once that moment came, it was then you decided, I'm going to take some action. and put a plan in place. I look back on my own journey and it was the lack of action for such a long period of time, that 10, 5 years, whatever it was for me, where I was like, I took some action at the start. I went and I started to coach endurance athletes alongside what I was doing. So that was giving me a little bit. But the 5 years where I kind of was doing that and knowing that I should be doing it full time, but took no action to what does it look like? How do I do it? I think the action part of it is something that we should probably leave people with as well. Once they get curious, once they start thinking about what they're doing, put a plan in place to actually do something about it. Now, your plan of spend an hour a day for 90 days getting curious about it, that's still taking action and that's still doing something about it, which I think is an important message for our listeners to take away.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that listening to podcasts like yours and podcasts like mine is also taking action because it's stimulating your thinking beyond your current thoughts and broadening out your mind, and you're picking up ideas along the way that you can take into your life and action, things that you can question about yourself, like mindset, as you said. And I think that, reading, talking to other people, listening to podcasts, so it's all really useful information and helps you get onto that track of working out for yourself what's next. I think one of the things that in my own podcast, I'm often talking to women who are a little bit like this, who are at the other side of some big change. And I often ask them at the end of the interview, what would you say to the listener who's in the same situation that you were in? And everyone says the same thing, which is just do it. And I think on the surface of it, it sounds very simple. And on the other hand, I would say, it can be really helpful to trust that the mindset and the action is trusting in your future self. And if you can see that other people have managed to make these changes, have navigated their way, and listen to the depth of their stories about the importance of getting to the other side, and knowing there might be some rough times in between, but that life can look really better on the other side, then I think drawing inspiration from that and building that sort of muscle of courage as well as curiosity to take those next steps is really important.
I definitely agree with that. There's something very powerful about having seen other people having gone through a similar story or a similar journey to what you would like to do, that enables us to see and understand, well, if they have done it, if Sue's been able to take that action and get curious about her life and make them changes to get her to a better place, then I can too. That is certainly one of the things that we want to do as part of our community, and I'm sure yours is the same, to just show people other people have done it, you can too.
Indeed.
So anything else you would like to leave our listeners with? Any words of wisdom that you would like to leave them with?
I think one of the other things that I would say about this journey of change is really about holding self-compassion. And, it's the antidote to perfectionism, self-compassion. So being kind to yourself through a process of change and being kind to the other people around you, bringing other people into your story. So making sure that others know what you're going through and can offer you their warmth and support and connection is also a very compassionate act. So what can you do that is going to make sure that you're supported and you're being really gentle and kind to yourself as well?
No, I like that. Maybe we spend a couple of minutes and talk about perfectionism, because I know that is one thing that can stop people. I cover it a lot in the leadership space, but in other mindset discussions, I know it's something that can really block people. I know it's something that held me back for a long time. I used to be kind of proud telling people that I was a perfectionist, because it was something that I really struggled with. I thought I had to be perfect. Now, I know it came from my past. I know it came from a few things that was happening in my childhood whenever I was growing up. I know that it was linked to the hard time that I had at school because of the dyslexia, but it really held me back for a long period of my life, that perfectionism. What's your relationship with perfectionism?
I knew you were going to ask that. What would I say? I think, I think perfectionism for all of us comes from childhood and childhood wounds. So not just messages that we get about what good looks like, but also some kind of component of self-esteem and good enough. They're the things that sit underneath perfectionism. I've got to be good enough. So that's kind of at the heart of it. So I think where that took me was into working and other aspects of my life that were about shoulds rather than wants, and a lack of self-compassion. And if I think about the falling asleep on the couch, I had very little self-compassion for myself that was, at the time, the go-to of shame was I shouldn't be like this. So the shouldn't and the shoulds become a core feature of perfectionism. And there's a harshness. There's a harshness that comes from perfectionism in response to that. And I think something, as you said, some people see it as a badge of honor. I think most people these days, we understand a little bit more about the psychology behind it, how many of us have lived our lives with a component of perfectionism. And I'd say I spend a lot of my coaching work undoing it, and not in a, you're a perfectionist, you got to stop that shit, but really about, is that true? That belief, is that true? How else might you think about that? What's something else you could try here? Really trying to get into, because perfectionism sits within that fixed mindset approach of this is how it's got to be, this is how it's always going to be, and I've just got to do it. And in a growth mindset, it's really about what are the different pathways and opportunities. What's another explanation for that? When someone can start to get a different sense of themselves, a different perspective on the possibilities as opposed to the shoulds and woulds and etc., then there's a relaxing into the body. There's a new emerging kind of confidence that starts to bubble up around someone's sense of themselves that is far, far away from that idea of having to be perfect, right, the best.
Can be a very useful tool. So I could talk to you all day, but I'm very mindful of your time. I really do want to thank you for coming on, giving up your time today. So I really do want to take a moment and acknowledge the good work that you're doing with your clients and with the community that you've created. It's something that I know is having a very positive impact on people out there, and I encourage you to just keep up the great work and continue to do the awesome work that you're doing.
Yeah, right back at you. I mean, I think we're doing similar things in different spheres and different states and different focuses, but it's all the same type of work, isn't it, in terms of supporting, the potential and possibility of human development and all the possibilities in life that are available to us in this day and age. I think it's wonderful work and important work that we do.
Look, as I say, I do appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you so much for giving up your time. I mentioned earlier how precious it is. So for you to give up an hour and a half and come on and have a conversation with us this morning, I'm really grateful, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
And now for the legal stuff. I am just some guy who has worked very hard on himself to get him from where he wasn't happy to a place where he is supremely happy, with the transformation of thinking he couldn't do everything to now believes that he can do anything. That was a long journey for me. Along that journey, I've spent 30 years of finding what's the best way to change our mindsets, to get us to a better place. I've completed a results coaching course, which enables me to coach others, which is something I've been doing for the last 5 years. And with my work with individuals, leaders and businesses, I get to see the challenges that people are facing every day. So if you're in need of some support and help, please seek professional advice or reach out to us at Feck It No More or SPC Success, and we'll certainly be able to point you in the right direction. Thanks for watching today's episode.